Jake, riptide. Riley felt the familiar burn his shoulders as he hauled another load of crystalline ore across the dusty yard of Detention Facility X-42. The double moons of Xylos hung low in the purple sky, casting an eerie glow over the barren landscape. 6 months in this hellhole, and he still wasn't used to the sight. Move faster, human. A harsh, clicking voice cut through his thoughts. The guard, a 7-foot Cthar warrior with chitinous armor gleaming in the dim light, jabbed him with an electric prod. Jake bit back a retort. Not worth it. Not today. He'd seen what happened to prisoners who talked back. Their remains were usually scraped off the yard by the cleaning drones the next morning. Facility X-42 was the Cthar Empire's pride, a labor camp for lesser species captured during their relentless expansion. The camp housed hundreds of prisoners from dozens of species across the galaxy, all working themselves to death mining the rare metamorphic crystals that powered the Empire's warships. Jake had been a space marine scout, part of an ill-fated reconnaissance mission that strayed too close to Cthar territory. His team was dead. He was here. End of story. Or so he'd thought. The prisoners were being herded back to their cells when Commander Zalter made her daily inspection. Even among the intimidating Cthar, she stood out. Nearly 8 feet tall with midnight blue chitin and 4 powerful arms, each ending in razor-sharp claws. 2 of her limbs bore ceremonial markings of high combat honors. The prisoners fell silent as she passed, eyes down, bodies tense. All except Jake, who kept his gaze level, a habit from his military days he couldn't seem to break. Zalter noticed. She always did. Slave. Her voice was a sinister combination of clicks and hisses through the translator. Human slave, still maintaining that pathetic posture of defiance. Jake said nothing, but didn't lower his eyes. Zalter circled him slowly, her mandibles twitching in amusement. I've studied your species. Such a biological error. Soft skin, fragile bones, laughable muscle density. She leaned closer, her alien breath hot on his face. Your kind should have been culled by natural selection millennia ago. The yard had gone completely silent. Jake felt the eyes of every prisoner in guard upon him. Maybe we just compensate in other ways, Jake said, the words escaping before he could stop them. Intelligence, adaptability. Things the Cthar seemed to lack. A collective gasp rippled through the assembled prisoners. The Cthar guards chittered angrily, hands moving to their weapons. Zalter froze, her compound eyes flashing with cold fury. Then, unexpectedly, she made a sound that might have been laughter. The human thinks it has spirit, she announced to the yard. The human slave believes itself clever. She stepped back, towering over Jake, and raised her primary arms in a formal gesture he'd never seen before. Tomorrow, human, you will join me in the circle of honor challenge. Her voice boomed across the yard. A ritual combat, one-on-one. No weapons for you, of course. She flexed her claws. I will demonstrate to all why humans remain slaves and Cthar remain masters. Jake's blood ran cold. He'd heard whispers about the circle, a rarely invoked combat ritual where higher-ranked Cthar could make examples of troublesome prisoners. No one had ever survived more than a few minutes. I will extend your suffering precisely, Zalter continued, her mandibles clicking in anticipation. You will beg for death before I grant it. She turned to the guards. Prepare him. Full rations tonight. I want him at his pitiful best. With a final contemptuous glance at Jake, she stalked away. As the prisoners were marched back to their cells, Jake maintained his stoic expression, but his mind raced. He'd just been given a death sentence, served with a side of public humiliation. Once in his cell, a 6x8 metal box with a hard cot and waste recycler, Jake allowed himself a moment of panic. He paced the tiny space, hands clenched into fists. Idiot, he muttered to himself. Couldn't keep your mouth shut for one more day. But as the initial shock faded, military training kicked in. Assess the situation. Identify resources. Form a plan. Jake had spent his 6 months in captivity watching the Cthar, learning their movements, studying their physiology. Not with any real hope of escape, just to keep his mind sharp. Now, that idle observation might be the only thing keeping him alive. He recalled what he knew about Cthar anatomy. For arms, 2 legs, exoskeleton. Incredible strength, but less flexibility than humans. Their armor like chitin protected vital areas, but had to be thinner at the joints to allow movement. Jake lay on his cot, staring at the ceiling, mentally cataloging every Cthar weakness he'd observed. Their height gave them power, but raised their center of gravity. Their compound eyes provided excellent peripheral vision, but had a small blind spot directly below them. It wasn't much, but it was something. A soft scratching at his cell door interrupted his thoughts. Jake tensed, ready for more Cthar harassment. Instead, a small hatch in the door slid open, and a tiny, 3-fingered hand appeared, holding what looked like a data chip. "Take," whispered a raspy voice. "Help!" Jake recognized the voice. XAX, an insectoid Calixi engineer who had been in the camp longer than almost anyone. Jake grabbed the chip quickly. "What is this?" he whispered back. "Cthar combat data. From before, when I worked on their ships." The hand disappeared, and the tiny hatch closed. Jake stared at the chip. Prisoners weren't allowed technology, but he knew the maintenance panel behind his waste recycler could read standard data formats. He discovered it months ago, but never had anything to use it for. He pried open the panel and inserted the chip. A holographic display flickered to life, showing anatomical diagrams of Cthar warriors and combat footage. Jake spent the night studying the data intensely. He learned that despite their formidable appearance, Cthar had several exploitable weaknesses. Their neck joints, where the head connected to the body, had minimal chitin protection to allow full range of motion. Their primary arms were stronger, but the secondary set had more limited movement patterns and slower reaction times. Most importantly, a nerve cluster at the back of their knee joint, if struck precisely, could cause temporary paralysis of the leg. As dawn approached, Jake had formed the outline of a plan. Not a good one. He still had almost no chance of survival, but better than nothing. When the guards came for him in the morning, Jake was ready, his face a mask of calm determination. Word of the challenge had spread throughout the facility. As Jake was marched toward the central yard, he saw prisoners lining the corridors, watching with a mixture of pity and morbid fascination. Some made small gestures that might have been wishes of good luck. Others simply looked away, already mourning yet another dead inmate. The yard had been transformed. The usual work equipment had been cleared away, creating a large circular area marked with luminescent paint. The Circle of Honor. Around it stood dozens of Cthar guards and officials, their chitin polished to a high shine for the occasion. Beyond them, prisoners from all blocks had been assembled to witness the spectacle. Jake was brought to one edge of the circle and left standing alone. A moment later, a horn-like instrument sounded, and Commander Zalter entered from the opposite side. She had dressed for the occasion in partial battle armor that accentuated her already imposing frame. Ceremonial glyphs had been painted on her chitin, and she carried a ritual staff that ended in a wicked curved blade. The crowd of Cthar clicked and chittered in approval. Zalter raised all 4 arms, basking in their admiration, before turning her attention to Jake. "The human slave appears ready to die," she announced, her translator broadcasting the words across the yard. "How considerate." Jake stood silent, conserving energy, focusing on his breathing. He noted how Zalter moved, the way she distributed her weight, the rhythm of her steps. A high-ranking Cthar official stepped forward. Jake recognized him as the facilities overseer. "The Circle of Honor has been called," the overseer announced. "Commander Zalter has invoked her right of challenge against the human prisoner Jake Riley. Victory comes by submission or death." He turned to Zalter. "As the challenger, you may choose one ceremonial weapon." Zalter raised her staff. "This will suffice." The overseer nodded, then looked at Jake. "As the challenged, you may request a shield." Jake shook his head. A shield would only slow him down. The Cthar seemed amused by this. A ripple of clicking laughter spread through their ranks. "The circle is sacred," the overseer continued. "What happens within it happens by our ancient laws. Begin when ready." He stepped back, leaving Jake and Zalter alone in the circle. Zalter twirled her staff with expert precision, the blade catching the light. "I will start with your limbs, human," she said, circling slowly. "One by one. How long will you maintain your defiance? I wonder. How loudly will you scream?" Jake said nothing, but shifted his stance slightly, his weight on the balls of his feet. Zalter's patience ended. With a piercing war cry, she lunged forward, staff extended, aiming to impale Jake through the shoulder. A non-lethal first strike to begin the promised torture. But Jake wasn't there. In the split second before impact, he dropped and rolled, not away from Zalter, but toward her, passing beneath her strike and inside her guard. Before she could register what had happened, Jake was behind her. Zalter spun with surprising speed, slashing horizontally with her staff. Jake ducked under the swing, then exploded upward with all his strength, driving his fist into the exact spot where 19's data had shown the nerve cluster at the back of her knee. The effect was immediate. Zalter's right leg buckled, throwing her off balance. As she stumbled, Jake seized the moment, grabbing her ceremonial staff with both hands and twisting it sharply. The unexpected leverage forced Zalter to either release the weapon or have her primary arms wrenched painfully. She let go, chittering in fury. Jake immediately flung the staff outside the circle and resumed his fighting stance as Zalter regained her footing, her leg functioning again after the momentary paralysis. "Lucky move, slave," she hissed, advancing again, now with all four arms extended, claws ready to rend flesh. Jake waited until the last possible moment, then sidestepped her charge, simultaneously striking at her vulnerable neck joint with the edge of his hand. The blow landed perfectly, sending a shock through Zalter's nervous system. She staggered forward, momentarily disoriented. Jake pressed his advantage, dropping low and sweeping his leg in a powerful arc that connected with both of Zalter's legs. With her high center of gravity already compromised, the impact sent her crashing to the ground with bone-rattling force. Before she could rise, Jake pounced, applying pressure to another nerve cluster at the base of her skull. Not enough to cause permanent damage, but enough to send waves of paralyzing pain through her body. Zalter lay immobilized, her compound eyes wide with shock and rage. Jake stood over her, breathing hard but uninjured. The entire combat had lasted exactly 30 seconds. A stunned silence fell over the yard. Kthar and prisoners alike stood frozen in disbelief. Nothing like this had ever happened in the facility's history, perhaps in the history of the Empire itself. Jake stepped back from Zalter's prone form, his face expressionless despite the adrenaline surging through his system. The overseer approached the circle slowly, mandibles twitching in agitation. "The human has incapacitated Commander Zalter," he announced, clearly struggling with the words. Zalter began to regain control of her limbs, pushing herself up with her secondary arms, her compound eyes fixed on Jake with pure hatred. "Finish it," she hissed. "Take your victory, slave." Jake looked down at her, then at the assembled Kthar. "I don't need to kill to prove my point," he said loudly enough for all to hear. "The circle has been honored. The challenge is complete." The overseer chittered rapidly with several other high-ranking Kthar before turning back to the circle. "The human speaks correctly. The circle has been honored. The challenge is complete." Two Kthar guards cautiously entered the circle to assist Zalter, who shoved them away and struggled to her feet alone, swaying slightly. "This changes nothing," she spat at Jake. "You are still a slave." This was an anomaly. Jake met her gaze steadily. "Then why not challenge me again? Right now." A ripple of clicks and hisses spread through the Kthar ranks. Zalter's compound eyes narrowed, but she remained silent. Everyone present knew that a second defeat would destroy her standing forever. "Take the prisoner back to his cell," the overseer ordered abruptly. "All prisoners return to work details. All Kthar personnel report for debriefing." As guards surrounded Jake to escort him away, he caught glimpses of the other prisoners' faces. Where before he had seen resignation and despair, now he saw something new: wonder, respect, and the dangerous beginnings of hope. Jake was placed in isolation. His cell was smaller than before, but surprisingly, it wasn't the punishment box used for troublemakers. Instead, it seemed to be a higher security holding area with stronger walls and a more sophisticated door. For 3 days, he saw no one except a silent drone that delivered food, better quality than standard prisoner rations. No guards taunted him. No officials questioned him. The silence was more unnerving than any interrogation would have been. On the 4th day, the cell door opened to reveal not a guard but the facility overseer himself, flanked by 4 heavily armed Kthar. "Human Jake Riley," the overseer said formally. "Your situation has created complications." Jake remained seated on his cot. "I followed your rules." "Yes," the overseer admitted, sounding displeased. "The Circle of Honor is sacred. Its outcomes cannot be disputed." He paused. "However, the defeat of a high-ranking warrior by a lesser species is unprecedented." "Sounds like a Kthar problem, not a human problem," Jake replied. The overseer's mandibles clicked in irritation. "There are factions among my people. Some see your victory as an anomaly best forgotten. Others view it as evidence that our assessment of humans may require reconsideration." That was surprising. Jake had expected many reactions, but not this one. "And Commander Zalter?" he asked. "Commander Zalter has been reassigned to Border Patrol duties," the overseer said. "Her defeat has diminished her status considerably." Jake nodded slowly, processing this information. "So what happens to me now?" "That remains undetermined. You cannot return to general population. Your presence would be disruptive. Yet executing you would violate the sanctity of the Circle." "Quite a dilemma," Jake said, unable to keep a hint of satisfaction from his voice. The overseer's compound eyes fixed on him coldly. "Do not mistake bureaucratic indecision for weakness, human. You remain our prisoner." With that, he turned and left, the guards backing out behind him. Left alone again, Jake pondered this new development. He was alive. That much was a victory. But he was still a prisoner, and now he was isolated from the other inmates, which eliminated any chance of organizing resistance or planning an escape. 2 more days passed in the same routine. Then, in the middle of the sleep cycle, Jake was awakened by a soft hissing sound. A section of his cell wall, previously seamless, had slid open, revealing a narrow passage beyond. Jake approached cautiously. It could be a trap. "Quickly, human Jake." A familiar raspy voice came from the darkness. "Security override temporary only." 19, Jake whispered, recognizing the Calixi engineer. "Kulme." Others waiting. Despite his suspicions, Jake had few options. He slipped through the opening into a maintenance tunnel barely tall enough for him to stand. 19's iridescent exoskeleton gleamed faintly in the dim emergency lighting. "How did you design systems before capture?" XX interrupted, already scurrying down the tunnel. "Kthar never changed security codes." "Arrogance." Jake followed, ducking to avoid exposed conduits. "Where are we going?" "Meeting." "Important. Your victory changed things." They traveled through the maintenance network for what felt like an hour, occasionally passing through junction boxes and access panels. Finally, they emerged into a larger space that Jake recognized as one of the disused storage chambers in the lower levels. To his surprise, the room contained nearly a dozen beings from various species, all prisoners he recognized from different work details. There was Morg, a hulking 4-armed Braxat whose rocky skin had made him valuable for the most punishing labor. Lyra, a slender Arcadian with silvery skin whose scientific knowledge had kept her alive when her physically weaker species would normally have been culled. Dr. Ven, an avian Talaxian whose medical skills were exploited to keep valuable prisoners functional. They all turned to look at Jake as he entered. "The human arrives," rumbled Morg. Lyra stepped forward. "We've been waiting for you, Jake Riley. Your defeat of Commander Zalter has created opportunities." Jake looked around the assembled group. "What kind of opportunities?" Dr. Vin fluffed his feathers nervously. "The Kthar Empire rests on the fundamental belief in their biological and cultural supremacy. Your victory, while seemingly minor to outsiders, has created significant psychological fissures in their command structure. Put simply, XX chittered, Cthar fighting each other now. Blame. Accusations. Power struggles. And how does that help us? Jake asked. Lyra's silver skin shimmered as she moved closer. We've been prisoners much longer than you, human. Some of us for years. We've watched, waited, gathered information. But we've never had a catalyst, something to destabilize the Cthar enough to give us a realistic chance. You're talking about escape, Jake said, realization dawning. More than escape, Morg grumbled. Resistance. The beginning of one, at least. Jake looked at the diverse group skeptically. No offense, but we're just a handful of prisoners. Even with the Cthar distracted, how could we possibly? We are not alone, Dr. Van interrupted, his beak clicking emphatically. There are others. Outside. This caught Jake's attention. Other what? Humans. Some humans, Lyra confirmed. But also Arcadians, Braxat, dozens of species who have suffered under Cthar expansion. There is a coalition forming. Secretly. Slowly. I was captured on a reconnaissance mission, Jake said slowly. We were looking for signs of Cthar weakness, potential allies. And now you have become both the weakness and the ally, 19 observed. Jake wasn't convinced. So what's the plan? And why me? I'm isolated, under special watch. Precisely why you're valuable, Dr. Venn explained. Your new status gives you access to different areas, different guards. And the Cthar are uncertain how to deal with you, which means their usual protocols are disrupted. Lyra nodded. We need information from the command center, current security codes, patrol schedules, communication frequencies. Things we can transmit to our outside allies. And I'm supposed to get this how exactly? Mord's rocky face split in what might have been a smile. They will come for you again. Important Cthar. They will want to understand how you defeated Zaltar. Study you. When they do, XIX continued, opportunity comes. The group outlined their plan. It was desperate, dangerous, and relied on too many variables beyond their control, but it was the only plan they had. Jake would use his unique position to gather critical information while the others prepared a facility-wide distraction. If all went well, they could transmit data to the coalition forces lurking at the edge of the system, setting the stage for a more organized resistance. And if it goes wrong? Jake asked. We die, Morg said simply. As we would anyway, eventually. Jake couldn't argue with that logic. They returned him to his cell before his absence could be discovered. XIX manipulating the security systems to erase any evidence of the breach. Jake lay on his cot, mind racing with the night's revelations, when a distant alarm began to sound. His cell door slid open moments later, and 4 armed guards entered. Up, Human 1 ordered. High Commander arriving. You have been summoned. Jake felt a chill. This was happening faster than expected. He was marched through corridors he'd never seen before, toward the administrative section of the facility. Prisoners stopped work to watch him pass, their eyes following with a new intensity. He was brought to a large chamber dominated by a circular table. Around it sat 5 Cthar in elaborate armor, bearing markings of high rank. At the head was the largest Cthar Jake had ever seen, with jet-black chitin inlaid with gold and silver. Jake Riley, the massive Cthar said, its translator producing a deeper, more resonant version of the usual Cthar speech. I am High Commander Zaltav of the Imperial Guard. I have come to see this anomaly for myself. Jake stood straight, meeting the High Commander's compound gaze. Not an anomaly, just a fair fight. A ripple of angry clicks passed among the other officers, but Zaltav raised a primary arm for silence. I have reviewed the recording of your combat with Commander Zaltar, the High Commander said. You exploited weaknesses in Cthar physiology with precision. This implies prior knowledge. Jake said nothing. The facility overseer believes you should be executed, Zaltav continued. He argues that you represent a potential focal point for prisoner unrest. Again, Jake remained silent. Others suggest you possess value, that your combat techniques should be studied to improve our own warriors' defenses. That perhaps humans have been underestimated. Zaltav leaned forward. What do you say, human? Jake considered his response carefully. I say that strength isn't just about biology. It's about adaptability, intelligence, and will. The Cthar are formidable, but no species is invincible. Interesting, Zoltav clicked. You speak of the Kthar with respect, despite your captivity. I respect capability, Jake replied. I don't respect cruelty or arrogance. The High Commander studied him for a long moment. You will be transferred to my personal research facility on Zal Prime. Your combat abilities will be analyzed thoroughly. If you cooperate, you will be treated well. If not, the threat hung unspoken in the air. This wasn't part of the resistance plan. If Jake was removed from the facility, the entire strategy would collapse. Before I make my decision, Zoltav continued, I wish to observe your abilities directly. He gestured to one of the officers. Captain Krav will test you in unarmed combat. Not to the death, merely a demonstration. The indicated officer stood, removing his ceremonial armor to reveal the gleaming natural chitin beneath. He was smaller than most Kthar, about Jake's height, but moved with the fluid grace of a highly trained fighter. Now, Jake asked, caught off guard. Now, Zoltav confirmed, as guards cleared a space in the center of the chamber. Jake's mind raced. This unexpected combat could ruin everything, or it could provide the opportunity the resistance needed. As he stepped into the cleared area, he noticed something critical. A command console near where Zoltav sat, displaying scrolling information about the facility. Captain Krav approached, taking a formal combat stance. Begin, ordered Zoltav. The Kthar captain moved with surprising speed, using techniques Jake hadn't seen before, clearly more sophisticated than Zoltar's straightforward aggression. Jake defended, giving ground, watching not just his opponent, but the console beyond. He needed to position himself correctly, and he needed time. Jake allowed Krav to drive him back toward the console, feigning greater difficulty than he actually felt. The Kthar officers clicked in approval as their champion appeared to dominate the human. As he neared the console, Jake made his move. He ducked under a sweeping strike from Krav, rolled past him, and came up directly beside the information display. In the split second before the guards reacted, his trained military eyes captured critical data, security codes, patrol rotations, and, most valuable, communication frequencies. Then he turned and met Krav's next attack head-on, blocking and countering with a precision strike to the nerve cluster in the Kthar's shoulder. The captain's right arms went momentarily limp. Zoltav chittered in surprise. The other officers rose from their seats. Jake didn't press his advantage. Instead, he stepped back and bowed slightly to his opponent. En excellente technique, far superior to Zoltar's. The unexpected compliment seemed to confuse the Kthar. Krav flexed his arms as sensation returned, eyeing Jake warily. Enough, Zoltav ordered. Most illuminating. Guards quickly surrounded Jake, but they seemed uncertain whether to restrain him or simply maintain position. You will be transferred tomorrow, the High Commander decided. Until then, return him to secure holding. As Jake was escorted out, he caught a final glimpse of Zoltav watching him with an intensity that suggested the High Commander suspected there was more to Jake Riley than met the eye. Back in his cell, Jake immediately began a plan. He needed to get the information to 19 and the others. But how? The maintenance tunnel entrance remained sealed, and he was under heavier guard than before. Hours passed with no solution presenting itself. Then, unexpectedly, his cell door opened to reveal a Kthar figure in full combat armor, face obscured by an ornate helmet. Jake tensed, ready for an attack, but the figure raised a hand in a surprisingly human gesture for silence. With the other hand, the Kthar deactivated the cell surveillance system. Riley, came a familiar voice through the translator, cold, precise, filled with barely contained fury. Zoltar, Jake couldn't hide his shock. The Kthar removed her helmet, revealing her midnight blue chitin and compound eyes burning with hatred. I have been humiliated, demoted, assigned to patrol the empty reaches of space because of you, human. Jake backed up cautiously. If you're here for revenge, remember that killing me violates your own laws after the Circle of Honor. I am not here to kill you, she hissed. I am here because you have created chaos in a system that was orderly. Because High Commander Zoltav, who never before questioned our protocols, now speaks of reassessment and adaptation. And that bothers you? It destroys everything we have built. Her voice was low but intense. The Kthar Empire thrives on absolute certainty in our superiority. Now there are doubts. Jake studied her closely. You're not just angry at me. You're angry at your own leaders for changing their views. Zalter's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation. Zaltav plans to use you to reform our combat training. He speaks of incorporating human techniques. It is sacrilege against our traditions. So what do you want from me? I want you gone, she said simply. Not dead. That would only strengthen Zaltav's position. I want you to disappear in a way that discredits both you and the High Commander's new policies. Jake saw the opportunity immediately. You want to help me escape. I want to sabotage Zaltav, she corrected sharply. Your escape is merely the method. And how exactly would this work? Zalter leaned closer. There is a supply transport departing tonight. Low security, minimal crew. I can provide access and temporary interference with tracking systems. Your disappearance will be blamed on High Commander Zaltav's progressive security protocols. Jake kept his face neutral, hiding his excitement. This was exactly what the Resistance needed. Not just information, but a way out. Still, he had to be careful. Why should I trust you? This could be an elaborate trap. You defeated me in fair combat, Zalter said, the words clearly painful for her. By Kthar tradition, that earns a measure of respect, even between enemies. She paused. Besides, if I wanted you dead, you would be dead already. Jake considered his options. If this was genuine, it could save not just him, but potentially all the prisoners involved in the Resistance. If it was a trap, well, he was already scheduled for transfer to Zal Prime, which would end any hope of helping the others. I'll need to make a stop before the transport, he said finally. Zalter's compound eyes narrowed. What stop? Storage sublevel B. There's something I need to retrieve. It was where XIX and the others would be waiting for their next meeting. Impossible. Too much security between here and there. Then I stay here and get transferred tomorrow, Jake said firmly. Your plan fails. Zalter chittered in frustration. You are in no position to make demands, human. And yet here, we are. After a tense silence, Zalter reactivated her helmet. 10 minutes. No more. And if you attempt anything beyond retrieval, I will kill you despite the traditions. Understood. Using her command codes, Zalter led Jake through back corridors and service tunnels, avoiding the main security checkpoints. As they approached storage sublevel B, she disabled the surveillance systems. 10 minutes, she repeated, taking position by the entrance. Go. Jake slipped inside to find XX already waiting, his iridescent exoskeleton vibrating with anxiety. Human Jake. Not expected until... Change of plans, Jake interrupted, quickly explaining the situation and relaying the critical information he'd gathered from the command console. Get this to your contacts outside. Tonight, I'll create a diversion with my escape that should draw attention away from any transmission signals. XIX absorbed the information rapidly. Risky. Zalter not trustworthy. I know, but it's the best chance we've got. Jake glanced toward the door. I need to go. Tell the others to be ready. If this works, it's just the beginning. If fail, Jake smiled grimly. Then find someone else to beat a Kthar commander in 30 seconds. He rejoined Zalter, who seemed surprised he hadn't attempted to flee or hide. They continued their tense journey through the facility's hidden infrastructure, eventually reaching a small hangar bay where an unmarked transport sat waiting, its engines already warming. The craft is programmed for automatic departure, Zalter explained. It will launch in 3 minutes and take a standard supply route. Beyond the asteroid belt, you will need to override the controls and change course. Why are you really doing this? Jake asked, still suspicious of her motives. Zalter was silent for a moment. The Kthar have ruled through strength for 10,000 years. If that is to end, let it be in glorious battle with worthy opponents, not through political accommodation. Jake understood then. Zalter wasn't just a soldier. She was a traditionalist facing the first winds of change in her society's history. She would rather face an honest enemy than a compromised version of her own culture. For what it's worth, Jake said, you fought well in the circle. Save your human sentiments, she snapped. This alliance is temporary and based solely on mutual benefit. The transport's hatch opened automatically. Jake paused before entering, looking back at the Kthar who had been his most dangerous enemy and was now, improbably, his escape route. When the resistance comes, and it will come, remember that not all humans want extermination. Some of us just want freedom. Zalter's compound eyes fixed on him. When the time comes, human, pray we do not meet in battle again. I have studied your techniques now. Jake smiled. So have I. He entered the transport as alarms began to sound in distant parts of the facility, undoubtedly part of Zalter's diversion. The hatch sealed, and moments later, the small craft launched into the purple-black sky of Xylos. As the moons and the prison facility receded behind him, Jake moved to the control panel. The ship was indeed on autopilot, heading for the main shipping lanes. His first task would be to override those controls and establish contact with the resistance forces Lyra had mentioned. The transport's control system was standard Kthar design, efficient but inflexible, relying on predetermined command sequences rather than adaptive algorithms. Jake had learned enough about their technology during his captivity to recognize the basics. He accessed the navigation subsystem and began searching for manual override protocols. An alarm suddenly blared through the cabin, and red warning symbols flashed across the display. Jake's heart sank as he read the Kthar text. Unauthorized access detected. Security lockdown initiated. Damn it, Zalter, he muttered. Had this been her plan, all along? To launch him into space in a locked ship that would either return automatically to a Kthar outpost or self-destruct. The engines cut power, and the transport began to drift. Jake frantically worked the controls, trying to bypass the security measures, but each attempt triggered new lockouts. The Kthar were nothing if not thorough when it came to preventing equipment theft. Just as he was about to give up on the control systems, a previously dark section of the panel illuminated with a series of symbols he didn't recognize. They weren't Kthar glyphs, they were Calixi script. XIX. The engineer must have anticipated something like this and created a hidden backdoor in the transport systems. Jake had no idea how to read the alien script, but he noticed a small Earth symbol among the characters. He pressed it. The panel reconfigured itself, with a simplified interface displaying basic navigation and communication options in multiple languages, including English. At the bottom was a short message, for allies only. Trace-protected channel follows. Jake selected the communication option. A static-filled screen appeared with a single prompt. Verification? He thought for a moment, then typed, Human Jake Riley. Defeated Kthar Commander Zalter in 30 seconds. The screen went blank for nearly a minute. Jake held his breath, watching the vacuum of space through the viewport, feeling utterly alone in the vast darkness. Then the screen flickered to life again, showing the face of a human woman with close-cropped gray hair and the hardened expression of a veteran. Riley, she said, her voice tight with controlled emotion. We thought you were dead with the rest of your recon team. Jake leaned closer to the screen. Commander Vega, how are you on this channel? Long story, Lieutenant. One with many casualties. Her eyes narrowed. How do I know this isn't a Kthar trick? They've tried planting false escapees before. Reconnaissance Mission Alpha, 716, 6 months ago, Jake replied. Your final order to our team was, and I quote, get in, get out, and for God's sake don't try to be heroes. We failed on all 3 counts, ma'am. A ghost of a smile crossed Vega's face. It's really you. Where are you now? We're tracking the signal, but getting inconsistent readings. Supply transport from Facility X, 42 on Xylos. Currently adrift after security lockdown. I got critical intelligence and a contact network inside the prison. Vega's expression sharpened. X-42? That's a high-value target. We've had our eye on it. But infiltration has been impossible. Not anymore. Jake quickly outlined the resistance cell he'd helped catalyze and the information he'd gathered about the facility's security systems. There are hundreds of prisoners in there from dozens of species, all potential allies. And there's dissension among the Cathar leadership about how to handle humans. Because of your little combat demonstration? Vega asked, raising an eyebrow. It seems to have made an impression. I'll bet. She typed something off-screen. We're dispatching a stealth retrieval vessel to your coordinates. ETA, 3 hours. Until then, maintain minimal power usage and keep this channel open. Commander, Jake said urgently. The prisoners are expecting action soon. My escape was supposed to provide cover for their transmission to you. Vega frowned. We've received no such transmission. Jake felt a cold knot form in his stomach. Had Zalter's betrayal extended to the others? Had she exposed the resistance cell? We need to move up the timetable, he insisted. If the Cathar discover the full extent of the organization inside, they'll execute everyone involved. Lieutenant, we have limited resources and 4 active operations in this sector. We can't just... Commander, with respect, this is the opportunity we've been waiting for. The Cathar are vulnerable right now. Internal conflict, security breaches, and a ready-made alliance of diverse species inside their own facility. We may not get another chance like this. Vega was silent for a long moment, studying him through the screen. You've changed, Riley. 6 months ago, you were a by-the-book officer who never questioned orders. 6 months in a Cathar labor camp will do that to you. She nodded slowly. I'll contact Fleet Command and push for accelerated action. In the meantime, prepare all the tactical information you have on X-42's defenses. If we're going to do this, we'll do it right. The communication ended, and Jake slumped back in the pilot's seat, exhaustion finally catching up with him. Freedom after so long in captivity felt strange, disorienting. The recycled air of the transport smelled different from the acrid atmosphere of Xylos, and the silence was absolute compared to the constant sounds of the labor camp. He allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection, remembering the faces of the other prisoners. XX, Lyra, Morg, Dr. Vin. They had placed their trust in him. Their lives now hung in the balance, depending on decisions made by distant commanders who might see them as acceptable losses in the greater conflict. Jake wouldn't let that happen. He turned back to the control panel and began methodically documenting everything he knew about Facility X-42, its layout, defenses, personnel rotations, and vulnerable points. If the Alliance was going to mount a rescue operation, he would make damn sure they had every advantage possible. 3 hours later, as promised, a sleek vessel materialized alongside the drifting transport. Unlike the bulky, chitinous designs favored by the Cathar, the Alliance ship was all smooth curves and reflective surfaces, designed to blend with the cosmos itself. A docking tube extended, creating a sealed passage between the vessels. Jake gathered the data he'd prepared and moved to the airlock. As it cycled open, he steeled himself for whatever came next. The resistance had begun with his 30-second victory over Zalter. Now, it would expand into something much larger, something that might eventually challenge the Cathar Empire itself. He stepped through the docking tube and into the Alliance vessel, leaving his prison transport behind. The door at the other end slid open to reveal a small reception area where Commander Vega waited with 2 security officers. "Welcome back to the Alliance, Lieutenant Riley," she said formally. Jake straightened and offered a salute, his first in 6 months. "Thank you, Commander. But I'm not the only one who deserves to come back." Vega's expression was unreadable. "Then let's make sure they do. Briefing room, 5 minutes. We have a prison break to plan." Back at Facility X-42, alarms blared throughout every level. The escape of prisoner Jake Riley had triggered a facility-wide lockdown and investigation. Commander Zalter stood before High Commander Zaltav in the command center, her posture rigid with carefully controlled fury. The human must have had inside help, she insisted. Security protocols were bypassed with high-level access codes. Zaltav's compound eyes studied surveillance footage on multiple screens. "Curious that you were seen near the detention block shortly before the escape, Commander Zalter. I was performing additional security checks due to the human's special status," she replied smoothly. "Given your interest in him, I took personal responsibility for ensuring he remained secured until transfer. Yet he escaped during your watch." Zaltav's voice was dangerously calm. A failure I will rectify personally, Zoltar vowed. I request permission to lead the pursuit force. Denied. The High Commander's mandibles clicked decisively. You will remain here and assist with the internal investigation. Captain Krav will lead the pursuit. Zoltar's chitin flushed darker with suppressed anger, but she bowed in acknowledgement. As you command. Tell me, Commander, Zoltav continued, turning his massive frame to face her directly. What do you make of the timing of this escape? Coming so soon after my arrival and announcement of the human's transfer to my research facility. Perhaps the human feared what your scientists would discover about him. Zoltar suggested carefully. Perhaps. Zoltav did not sound convinced. Or perhaps someone feared what I might learn from him about our own weaknesses. Before Zoltar could respond, an alert sounded from the communications console. A Kthar technician spoke urgently. High Commander, we're detecting unusual subspace fluctuations in the outer system. Possible cloaked vessels. How many? Zoltav demanded. Pattern analysis suggests 3. No, for ships. Alliance configuration. The command center erupted in a flurry of activity. Orders were issued, defense systems activated, patrol ships scrambled. Through it all, Zoltar stood still, her compound eyes revealing nothing of her thoughts. Zoltav turned to her once more. It seems our escaped human may have had more resources than anticipated. What remarkable timing. The Alliance has tried to penetrate this sector before, Zoltar noted. They always fail. Yes. The High Commander's voice took on a thoughtful quality. But they've never had someone who defeated a Kthar warrior in 30 seconds leading them before, have they? Deep in the maintenance tunnels beneath the facility, 19 hurried through the narrow passages, his chitinous body scraping against the conduits. The small data transmitter clutched in his upper appendages had failed to send its message. The Kthar were jamming all unauthorized communications following Jake's escape. The engineer reached a junction box where Lyra waited, her silvery skin dimmed to absorb rather than reflect light. Transmission failed, 19 reported. Security protocols escalated. All systems monitored. Lyra's delicate features hardened. Jake would have reached them by now. The Alliance will come regardless. But without coordinates, without security codes? XIX clicked in dismay. Blind attack suicide against Kthar defenses. Then we must create our own opportunity, Lyra decided. Gather the others. If the Alliance is coming, they'll need chaos from within to succeed. As they slipped away through the tunnels, neither noticed the tiny surveillance drone that had detached from its docking port to follow them, its visual and audio feeds transmitting directly to Commander Zoltar's private channel. In the depths of space beyond Xylos, 4 Alliance vessels dropped their cloaking fields simultaneously, revealing sleek warships bristling with advanced weaponry. They accelerated toward the prison moon, their engines leaving trails of blue energy against the blackness. Aboard the lead ship, Jake stood on the bridge beside Commander Vega, watching as the facility grew larger on the main view screen. After 6 months as a prisoner, he was now returning as a liberator. All ships in. Attack formation, reported the tactical officer. Kthar defense grid activating. Initiate electronic countermeasures, Vega ordered. Lieutenant Riley, final confirmation on target locations? Jake studied the tactical display, indicating key points on the facility schematic. Primary power core here. Communication array here. Detention block force fields are controlled from this substation. Vega nodded. Priority targets confirmed. All ships commence attack run. Phase 1 authorized. The Alliance vessels accelerated to combat speed, their forward batteries unleashing precisely targeted energy beams at the facility's external defenses. The Kthar responded immediately, automated defense platforms pivoting to track the approaching ships. They were ready for us, Jake observed grimly as enemy fire began to streak toward them. They're always ready, Vega replied. That's why we don't play fair. At her signal, the Alliance warships released dozens of small, autonomous strike drones that scattered in multiple directions, confusing the Kthar targeting systems. In a momentary distraction, the main vessels altered course, diving toward the facility's least defended quadrant. Detecting Kthar patrol ships launching, the sensor officer reported. 8 vessels, interceptor class. Right on schedule, Vegas said with grim satisfaction. Deploy countermeasures and proceed with Phase 2. The lead Alliance ship continued its approach while the other 3 ships peeled off to engage the Kthar interceptors. Jake watched the tactical display with growing tension. Everything depended on timing now. The external attack needed to create sufficient distraction for the internal resistance to act. Inside Facility X-42, the resistance cell had grown from the original dozen to over 50 prisoners representing 17 different species. They gathered in an abandoned processing chamber, communicating in hushed tones as distant explosions shook the structure. The attack has begun, Lyra announced. We must move quickly. Each group knows its assignment. Affirmations came from around the room. Morg led a team responsible for disabling internal security systems. Dr. Van would coordinate the medical response for injured prisoners. Others would secure weapons, disable tracking implants, or lead evacuations from different cell blocks. XIX approached Lyra, his iridescent exoskeleton dulled with worry. Still no word from human Jake. Cannot confirm extraction point. We stick to the original plan, Lyra insisted. The northeastern landing platform has the weakest defenses. If the Alliance breaks through, that's where they'll land. As the Resistance members dispersed to their assigned tasks, a shadow detached itself from the ceiling above, a Kthar guard in stealth armor, who had been listening to every word. It moved silently toward an alarm panel. But before it could reach the panel, a slender form materialized from the darkness. Zalter, her midnight blue chitin making her nearly invisible in the dim light, seized the guard with all 4 arms. Commander? The guard's surprised exclamation was cut short as Zalter efficiently neutralized him with a precise strike to a nerve cluster. Lyra spun around, her silver skin flashing in alarm. Thar, she warned the others, but it was too late. Zalter stood before her, the unconscious guard at her feet. You are the Arcadian, Zalter stated, her translator rendering her clicks into flat, emotionless speech. The one called Lyra. XIX chittered in panic, his appendages searching for a weapon, any weapon. Be still, Zalter commanded. If I wanted you dead, you would be dead already. Lyra stepped forward, placing herself between Zalter and the others. What do you want, Commander? Your resistance is known to me, Zalter said. I have monitored your communications since the human defeated me. The resistance members tensed, expecting guards to swarm in at any moment. Yet you haven't reported us, Lyra observed carefully. Why? Zalter's compound eyes shifted, taking in the assembled prisoners. The Kthar Empire has ruled through strength for 10,000 years. High Commander Zaltav believes this can change, that we can adapt, compromise, evolve. And you disagree, Lyra surmised. I believe that strength must be tested against worthy adversaries, Zalter replied. The human proved himself worthy in the Circle of Honor. Now you will prove whether your alliance of species deserves freedom or extinction. She reached into her armor and withdrew a data module, tossing it to XIX. Security override codes. Defense grid access. Evacuation protocols. XIX caught the module reflexively, his compound eyes widening in shock. Why help prisoners escape? I'm not helping you escape, Zalter corrected sharply. I am ensuring that this conflict returns to its proper form. Open warfare between enemies who respect each other's strength, not political. Maneuvering by those who fear change. She turned to leave, then paused. The northeastern platform is compromised. Zaltav knows your plan. Use the maintenance bay in Quadrant 6 instead. With that, she melted back into the shadows, leaving the stunned resistance members staring after her. Can we trust her? Dr. Venn asked, his feathers ruffled in agitation. Lyra studied the space where Zalter had vanished. No, but I believe she's telling the truth about the landing platform. Her pride wouldn't allow her to lie about battle. It's too sacred to the Kthar. And the security codes? Morg rumbled skeptically. XIX had already connected the module to a diagnostic tool. Codes authentic. High-level access. Command grade. Then we adjust our plan, Lyra decided. Morg, redirect your team to Quadrant 6. XIX. Use these codes to disable the inner defense grid. Everyone else, proceed as planned. She looked around at the diverse group of former prisoners, now warriors in their own right. The Alliance is coming. Make sure they have something to find when they get here. Above the facility, the space battle intensified. Thar interceptors swarmed around the Alliance vessels, their energy weapons creating webs of destructive force. The Alliance ships responded with precisely targeted counterattacks, their superior technology partially offsetting the Kthar's numerical advantage. On the bridge of the lead ship, Jake watched a tactical hologram of the facility with growing concern. The northeastern platform is heavily reinforced, he reported. They've doubled the guard presence there. Commander Vega frowned. They knew our approach vector. We need an alternative. Jake studied the display, searching for options. There, he said, indicating a different section. Maintenance Bay, Quadrant 6. Minimal defenses, direct access to the central corridors. Could be a trap, Vega pointed out. Could be, Jake agreed. But right now, it's our best option. The commander considered for a moment, then nodded. Helm, adjust course for Quadrant 6. Tactical, reconfigure attack pattern to create a diversion at the northeastern platform while we approach the new landing zone. As the order was acknowledged, the ship shuddered under enemy fire. Damage reports flashed across multiple screens. With our defense grid adapting to our attack profile, the tactical officer warned. Effectiveness of electronic countermeasures decreasing. Where are those internal sabotage effects we were promised? Vega demanded, gripping the command rail as another impact rocked the ship. Jake opened his mouth to respond when suddenly the tactical display changed dramatically. Throughout the facility, security systems began shutting down section by section. Defense turrets went dark. Force fields collapsed. Internal systems failing across the facility, the sensor officer reported, unable to keep the surprise from her voice. It's working. Jake felt a surge of pride and relief. XIX, Lyra, and the others had come through. The resistance was fighting back. All ships, prepare for final approach, Vega ordered. Extraction teams to landing craft. Lieutenant Riley, you're with Alpha Team. You know the facility layout better than anyone. Jake nodded, adrenaline flooding his system. After 6 months as a prisoner, he was about to return to Facility X-42 as a liberator. The irony wasn't lost on him. As he made his way to the launching bay where the assault team waited, his thoughts turned briefly to Commander's altar. Had she been captured when internal sabotage began? Was she fighting against the resistance? Or had something more complex happened in the wake of their 30-second combat that had changed even her rigid Kthar worldview? The landing craft disengaged from the main ship and accelerated toward the facility, escorted by fighter drones. Jake checked his weapon, an Alliance pulse rifle far more advanced than anything he'd had on his original recon mission, and addressed the assault team. Remember, we're not just fighting Kthar. We're rescuing allies from multiple species. Many don't resemble humans. Verify targets before engaging. The Resistance members will be moving prisoners toward extraction points, so expect civilians in the combat zones. The team acknowledged his instructions as the craft entered the facility's atmosphere. Through the viewport, Jake could see explosions and weapons fire across the prison complex. The battle had fully engulfed Facility X-42. The landing craft descended toward Quadrant 6, its stealth systems engaging to minimize detection. As they approached the maintenance bay, Jake saw that the massive doors stood open, another sign that the Resistance had successfully implemented their plan. 30 seconds to touchdown, the pilot announced. Jake readied himself at the exit ramp, pulse rifle at the ready. After everything, the capture, the labor camp, the circle of honor, the escape, had come to this moment. The 30 seconds he'd spent defeating Zalter had changed everything, not just for him, but potentially for the entire power structure of this sector of space. The craft touched down with a slight jolt. The ramp lowered, revealing the interior of the maintenance bay. A group of figures waited inside. Not Kthar guards, but Lyra, XAX, and several other resistance leaders. "Welcome back, Human Jake," 19 chittered, his iridescent exoskeleton gleaming under the landing craft's lights. Jake stepped onto the deck of Facility X, 42 once more, but this time with allies at his side and freedom within reach. "Let's finish what we started," he said. Lyra nodded, her silver skin reflecting the chaos of battle outside. "The prisoners are mobilizing. Many guards have been neutralized, but High Commander Zoltav has sealed himself in the command center with his elite warriors." "And Commander Zoltar?" Jake asked, unable to suppress his curiosity. A strange expression crossed Lyra's alien features. "That," she said, "is complicated." High above the facility, watching from a stealth observation vessel, Commander Zoltar observed the battle unfolding below. Her midnight blue chiton seemed to absorb the light from the tactical displays surrounding her. "The Kthar Empire rests on the fundamental belief in our biological and cultural supremacy," she murmured to herself, echoing Dr. Ven's word from days earlier. "Yet a human defeated me in 30 seconds. Her compound eyes narrowed as she watched Alliance landing craft disgorging troops into the facility she had once helped command. In the chaos, hundreds of prisoners were breaking free, guided by resistance members toward extraction points. Zoltar had made her choice, not for the humans or the Alliance or even the resistance, but for the future of the Kthar themselves. Zoltav's path of accommodation and adaptation would weaken them, make them soft. But this conflict, open, honest warfare against worthy adversaries, would force the Empire to evolve through strength rather than compromise. She entered coordinates into her navigation system. There were other Kthar commanders who would understand her vision, who would see the value in respecting enemies strong enough to challenge them. Together, they would forge a new path for the Empire. Not Zoltav's way of adaptation, but a return to the pure principles of honor and strength that had sustained them for millennia. As her vessel accelerated away from Xylos, Zoltar allowed herself one final glance at the facility where a human slave had changed everything in 30 seconds. The next time they met, she vowed the outcome would be different. But deep in her warrior's heart, she felt something unfamiliar, a flicker of uncertainty, and perhaps even respect.